Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. I'm so glad that you're with us today. We're talking about everyday leadership. We're reminding ourselves that it's great to go to the conference and to read the book, but sometimes it's the person right across the street that is a school teacher, a mother, a local politician, a business owner, an entrepreneur who have had incredible success in their life. And if we'll ask the questions, they often have the answers. And today is no exception. We actually have one of our local city government politicians. I don't know if that's the right word, but it is our commissioner. Commissioner Ryan, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here today with you, Pastor Troy.
Well, thank you so much for coming and giving us of your time. I know you're a busy person, a lot going on. So why don't you take a moment when we start, just tell us a little bit about your family, your profession, and then we'll go from there.
And then I'll tell you about my hobby as a commissioner.
Okay, there you go.
Like I said, thank you for having me. My name is Ryan Shrouder, and I'm a city commissioner here in Cooper City. I was born and raised in Cooper City. I'm one of 7 kids, so grew up in Cooper City, was raised by my mother. I was telling one of the assistant pastors earlier, I've probably been through every crevice of this city on my bicycle throughout the years here. But
were you the oldest, youngest?
I was number 5, so I could do whatever I wanted. I'm not even sure they would know if I was home or not. So it's a little bit of an independence benefit of being number 5. So I grew up here in Cooper City. I'm an attorney by trade. I went through the school system here in Cooper City. Had a lot of mentors, a lot of the community, so to say, friends, parents that I got to know and mentored me. Ultimately, I went to Florida State for my undergrad and Nova Southeastern for my law school. I met my wife at Florida State while I was a student. We both worked at a hospital there, and my wife's a physician now. I was a unit secretary, so it didn't take off too well in the medical field, but it worked out at least with law and politics.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching or listening today, you may not know, Nova is a local school here of very high credibility and really an incredible school. We're blessed for it to just be down the road.
We are. Nova is a nonprofit private university that similar to a lot of the other institutes in our area, was really kind of taken by the local community and grown into what is primarily a grad school, medical school, law school type of university. And I was very fortunate to be able to attend that and still stay in my community.
Yeah, you are Florida all the way.
I am.
So tell us, how'd you and your wife meet?
Well, I believe in statistics a little bit. So when you work at a hospital and only about a quarter, if that, of the people there are men, it's a little bit easier. So for her, she didn't have as many options. I had a lot more because, but I needed the more options because she's certainly the better of the two. So we worked in our undergrad. We worked at a hospital. My wife was an ICU tech, while she was taking her classes to go to med school, and me, luckily, I had a neighbor back home here in Cooper City who worked for the hospital corporation and was able to get me a job there. In Tallahassee, it's not easy to get jobs because there's an influx of students. And so that's how I ended up working in the hospital and ultimately was able to meet my wife.
Well, that worked out pretty good. Now, so are you both, I guess, big Florida State fans? We
are. What ends up happening is I think I'm still more of a fan. I want to go to the games. Once my wife, once we had children, her priorities shift a little bit, but mine are pretty still pretty strong with Florida State.
Well, they're built back on the football program, so
yeah. Last year was an exciting year for us.
Yes. All right. So now, and how many children did you say that you have?
We have 3 children now.
And how old are they?
Our daughter's 9, and then we have 2 boys that are 4.5 and 3.5.
Wow, the busy age, but the fun age too.
It's very rewarding. Probably the most rewarding thing in life is children.
Now I know the 4-year-olds got to think that you're the hero. What about the 9? Does the 9 still see you as the hero, or
my it's interesting. Children, they're so unique with their personality. So my 9-year-old, she's an angel. She truly has my wife's personality, and so she sees me as a hero and is quick to let me know when she thinks I need to act like a hero and not like a non-hero. And my boys, they're a little more wild. So they'll encourage me to, cut the line and the drop off, or, speed through the light a little more than my daughter, who likes to worry and remind me to put my seatbelt on.
It's amazing how they're all different, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
So now you also are an attorney.
I
So
am.
tell us a little bit about what you do there.
So I'm an attorney by trade. I practice primarily real estate and civil litigation. I like to say any type of law that you wouldn't see on a bus going by. So no accidents, no criminal law, none of that type of stuff. Once again, I'd always wanted to be an attorney. I enjoyed arguing from the time I was in grade school on, and I always thought I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. But when I was in law school, I once again had a family, or a friend of mine's parent from the city, say, hey, we have an opening at the firm I work at. So I started working in law school at the firm I now end up owning. So, I've only had one job in the legal industry.
That's great. I look forward to talking a little bit about that. And then you are a commissioner here in Cooper City. So for those who don't know, what exactly is a commissioner?
So a commissioner is essentially at the municipal level, at the city level, there is a board like you would maybe see with an HOA or a county commission, and it's called the city commission, comprised of 5 people, 4 commissioners and a mayor, and by majority, so three out of the 5, the decisions are made for the city regarding any of the city services, which would be your water, your sewer, your public safety, police and fire, your roads, any of those type of issues. Almost any interaction you're going to have with local government, with the exception of the school districts, which is done at a county level, is done via the city commission. And as a commissioner, you set the policy, you set the budget, you set the taxing, and then you hire professionals to execute on those policies or direction.
Well, Cooper City is where Potential Church is located, and we're excited about our kids went to school here in Cooper City. So, well, they went to school in a lot of places, but Cooper City is one of those places, the middle school, and it was a great experience. So I appreciate all the work that you do there. Now, when you were growing up, we were talking a little bit earlier. What are some of the things that you may have been involved in, whether student government or athletics, that you're now able to use in your law firm or in your work for the city?
When I was growing up, I was in student government, maybe from middle school on. In high school, I was a class president for 3 of the years, and in addition to that, I was also I was mentored a lot, and I was part of the local police explorer program. So the interesting thing is, once you become an elected official, everyone has their own, I don't want to say priorities, but niches. And my niches are ultimately the experiences I had growing up. So you could probably imagine who is one of the most pro public safety. It helps that I know a lot about it because I spent a lot of time riding in the police cars as a police explorer and whatnot. Also, when one of the great experiences I had growing up, being in student government, I had the opportunity to be on some of the student advisory council meetings or committees with the then elected officials. And one of my big mentors was our former mayor, Mayor Eisinger. And as a student, she would take me to commission meetings or different county meetings. So I would get involved in these different things. So an interesting side story is one of the topics in our county, Broward County, is the 911 system. For years, they've been working on it. You probably heard a little bit about some of the issues there were with the MSD issue. And I started as a student associate member on that committee when, 15 years ago or 13 years ago, they were working to regionalize it. And now I find myself as an elected official still participating and working in it. So sometimes I have a little bit more advanced knowledge because of these,
Right. Well, I need to follow you around. So you where you were working in the hospital, you met your wife, and then the law firm you started at, you now own. So it looks like your life is always on a progression. That's a pretty interesting. Now, let me tell you a story that happened to me. I grew up in a a rural town in another state of Arkansas, and I went on a ride along with the police officer, and I'm sure he broke every rule in the book. But we get in the car, and he gives me a gun, and sets me in the front seat. He says, in case you need it or something. I don't know, and I didn't grow up around guns, so I don't really, I don't know what to do with them. So I'm not a little uncomfortable with it. So I put it down on the floor. And then we end up picking up a criminal, and he's like, "Where's your gun?" And it had slid under the seat, and it was in the back seat with the criminal. So, needless to say, he ended up getting fired over something else, but it was just as crazy. But I learned a lot that night, and you forget sometimes that we had an officer on earlier that we were talking to, and about some of the challenges that they face. In reality, we tend to forget. If it's not us, we tend to forget the challenges that other folks face along the way. So what's some things that you learned in student government, if there were any, that has actually helped you as either an attorney or a business owner or a commissioner?
You probably learn a little bit about bureaucracy in student government because you're dealing with, the school board, which is obviously a very large entity. But I wouldn't pin any of my experience, anything I've learned from any particular experience. I mean, overall, I feel like I've taken or learned something from each one of my different experiences. Student government, you certainly learn how to work with some people. One of the things that's different, sometimes when you lead an organization, you're in charge of an organization as a CEO or something. It's a little bit different than when you're on a board, where you have to convince other people that they should, go with you or vote with you in order to accomplish what you think's the best. And I think I learned a little bit of that in student government. We were, probably about 5 or 7 different officers are elected, and it's, things are done through majority vote, and you don't always get to try or attempt what you think's right. You have to compromise and work with people, and that's very similar to the city commission.
Now, has that been frustrating as owning a firm, and then where you have that kind of authority, and then going into city government where you have to work with other people?
It's extremely frustrating, and it's not just working with other people. It's I don't want to say the red tape, but the bureaucracy. For example, in the state of Florida, we have Sunshine Law, which prohibits any 2 elected officials on the same board from discussing an item they're going to vote on outside of a meeting. So what happens is, although we could be, great friends and commissioners and have the same idea, if I want to put it forward for a vote, I can't have that conversation with you. So you have to have a meeting, notice it, and now you're just essentially, things are dragged down. And it's a great law. It's for transparency, but the downside of that is the bureaucracy behind it. So you can't just make a decision. You got to get it voted on. You notice it.
That's a sad thing in really any environment when we don't do what we need to do as human beings. Then that means somebody's got to make a rule. Somebody's got to make a law, and that's always going to be more restrictive and actually slow things down.
It's true. And as an elected official, I try to not make rules for the minority that are going to ultimately affect the majority. And I think I've tried my best to repeal some stuff. Just a little side one, it was illegal for many years to fish from a bridge. And while there might be a couple rare incidences why that's a good rule, I don't think it really is that important. It's probably better if we have kids fishing from bridges. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can respond. And now you don't have to. I don't want necessarily your thoughts on this because I don't know what you think. But I was even thinking as I was coming. I saw on TV where the state legislature's trying to decide whether or not to outlaw pets riding in your lap, whether or not they have to be in a cage or whatever. And I was as I was driving, because I have a little Shih Tzu that often rides in my lap. So I was driving up here, and I was thinking that's the question I had. I thought, should I write the governor or whatever and ask the question, how big an issue is it? In other words, if little dogs are creating harm, then I'd be all for the law. But if that's happened to a few people, and then now we're going to restrict everybody, or if people are distracted, I'm sure. But it was just that thought that we can, I know even as a leader here at Potential Church, I can, if I'm not careful, the misbehavior of one person causes me to make a rule that affects everybody.
Yeah, on the same topic, I just read that too, and I would bet the farm that's an overreaction or knee-jerk reaction to something that's not really a major issue. I was in Ecuador, I think it was last week, and I always read the news, and as we're driving down the street, I'm looking and watching some of the people ride on a moped or a motorcycle with a kid. And I'm thinking, we're talking about outlawing the dog sticking his head out the window while, because of necessity, right. You have what I would consider is a very dangerous, situation. So I would think that the dog out the window thing is a really, really first world problem. That's yeah. Probably not that significant. And if it is, maybe we should work on education and right. Not rules.
Rules are easier, and I'm sure the same thing at your firm, where it's easier. Control's always easier. If I tell everybody what to do and make it a rule, they have to do it. It's not necessarily effective. Nobody's necessarily happy, but it's easier sometimes.
Yes, it's a lot easier and it's a lot less effective. Exactly. So that's the knee-jerk reaction, right? Nope, yep. Here's a new rule. You can't do this anymore, and then you start to the emotional intelligence, the EQ, and you say, well, maybe that's not the best way. If I want to, engage, it's probably not mandating. It's probably
just look at
showing them.
And realize, it's the ones who are in power that are tempted to, make the rules or the laws
with the exemptions for them.
Yeah, yes, that's for sure. So, what are some of the things that you've learned about people between your profession and then in city government that reinforced what you thought, or maybe a surprise?
I'm always learning, and I think everyone starts at a certain place, and then their goal should be to work towards the other side. And I laugh and say I'm naturally a cynical person, and not that I'm proud of that, but just when you analyze something, I'm the half empty type, and I've learned, or I'm learning, to not be so judgmental, so to say. And to maybe look at the other side of things, and that's what I hope to continue to learn how to do. And I think that's probably a better balance.
You have to be intentional, though, to do that.
Yeah, I have to be intentional because I'm predisposed to right. Being cynical, so to say. I don't know if that's the right word, but
right. And we all are. I think if you're not self-aware, it's real easy to start to believe that everything you believe is the only way. Or now, have you? We hear a lot. Every conversation on television, especially, or online, is about we're a divided country. So, and do you see that same thing in local politics, or do you see something different?
I don't see it as much locally. What I see, I think a lot of that's sensationalized.
Well, I actually pronounced a word
by the media, and we have less local media. It's not like at the national level where you have people running it all the time, nonstop. But from the state level up, it's sensationalized. It is very divisive, and it doesn't make any sense, because I think there's plenty of laws or things at the federal level that surely both sides should be able to agree on,
right? And
they don't. So at the local level, I don't see that as much.
It seems like just social media, while there's a lot of benefits to it. I know even through the process of COVID, one of the things that we saw in the church world that I had never seen in my time is things that really we all agree on divide people. In other words, the virus is bad. We can all agree on that, but how bad is it became a divider, or that racism is bad, and we can all agree on that, but how much do you hate it became a divider. And the social media, and maybe just the media even in general, really stirred. I think maybe it leads to cliques and some of those kind of things to cause that division. I think social media could be is very makes
local government very hard. And you have people who may have before watched something on TV and yelled at the TV, but they were not really sure what the item is, to now taking to social media and offering what is an uninformed opinion. And the next thing you know, it just starts these spiraling of this and that. So there's so many examples I could tell you where, when I first got in, I would try to respond and actually try to correct things. And I realized a lot of these people don't actually want to be informed. They just want to say it, and then it just starts into another one. So one of the things I'm predisposed to is adversarial, defend. I'm an attorney, fire back. I had to learn to sit on my hands with some of the social media stuff because you can't fight it. It's there's no way to reach back out, and you just go down these rabbit holes, and next thing you know, you spend 5 hours on social media responding to comments that no one really spent any time making in the first place. So I think that's difficult, and I fear that social media is going to prevent a lot of people, otherwise very good and qualified people, from volunteering or participating in the community, because sometimes you take on criticism that's...
We've become a very judgmental society, it seems like, real very quickly to judge one another just based on a lack of information, really, a picture, something to that effect.
We have, and give you another funny example. We had an RV ordinance in Cooper City, boat ordinance, that wouldn't allow something over 12 feet. And it turns out, most RVs with the AC unit was like 12 feet, 6 inches. So we figured, hey, let's, be more restrictive, but put it at 13. So we're kind of going to cover most of it, and then we'll prevent the really large ones. So we have an item on there to expand from 12 to 13 so that, the law made more sense, actually what the actual size of a lot of these vehicles are. And next thing you know, we have people come in and they're upset with us, demanding that we're taking away, not even realizing we're actually expanding. And they're telling you, well, I moved here because I could do this. And they got all worked up. Somebody got them all worked up on social media, and they didn't even realize we're adding 6 inches to the height thing. And you wonder, what type of, what's going on that these people who ordinarily would never waste their time coming to a city commission meeting came out, left work early or whatever, missed dinner to come yell at us because they think we're getting rid of something when we're really adding an additional 6 inches. And so
that's yes, it's we jump first and then we ask questions later. So how do you deal with that, right? How do you go home and you got your kids, you got your wife, you got life, but you just sat through, and you're a human being. So I can come up there and I can be angry, and I'm going to respond based on how I feel, and forget that the people sitting around the table in the roles of leadership sometimes are people too. So how do you not take it home and distract you from...
So everyone's different. I probably have thicker skin than most, but my downfall is I'm fast to respond. Hey, maybe you should check your facts, or I should bite my tongue more often. But I've had other colleagues that I served with that I thought were phenomenal commissioners, and they just didn't run again. And in their opinion, they say, hey, why am I going to run again if, what am I wasting my time? It's essentially, you're volunteering, you're not profiting. And so that's the trouble, is you either have a defensive response, or you go the other way and you say, hey, why am I wasting my time?
Now, does your wife deal with it, well, or does she just not pay attention to what people have to say about you, or how does she deal with it?
She doesn't deal with it well, because naturally we're opposite. So I've convinced her to leave some of the social media groups, because they could be brutal, and I tell people, hey, listen, if you don't like me, my wife probably dislikes me just as much as you. Don't yell at her. Being a little facetious, but so I've convinced her to try not to pay attention to it. But it's hard for people who you have different personalities. And of course, the one thing I haven't had to deal with yet, which would be hard for me, is when my kids become of the age where they're on the social media, if that's impacting your children, there would be a line for me. I wouldn't want to continue and if my kids are being affected. So I'm not there yet. Obviously, my oldest is 9 and she does not have social media, but that's a real problem that some local elected officials have to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody, when you're out in the public like that. So before we run out of time, a couple of questions is, first of all, when you get discouraged, how do you overcome that? Because my experience in dealing with people is really perseverance is the difference between success and failure. We all have certain gifts and talents. It's just that some give up a little bit sooner than others. So you've had a lot of success in your life, from the family to your law firm to now city government, and I'm sure along the way you've gotten discouraged. So where do you go? What do you do when you get discouraged?
I'm the type that likes to double down. So that's a benefit, I guess, to my personality, that I'll double down. There have been times, obviously, where you hit roadblocks and you get discouraged, but I'm just a little more predisposed. I tell people I grew up one of 7, single mother, so kind of used to fighting all day long. There's not much you could try to torture me with that one of the other 6 didn't do growing up. But so that I usually try to power through it, but I find myself, I find myself wanting to make sure I increase my emotional intelligence and think things out more instead of just being like a bull in a china shop. One of the things that's helped me the most is a lot of the other successful people in our community that I've met. And I try to look at the way they handle things. And a lot of times throughout the day, I ask myself, what would this person do, or how would they handle that situation? And I try to contrast it with my natural reaction to handling it.
So do you think, do a little self inspection here, do you think that your confidence, right, because to do what you've done, you have to have do you think it's confidence that you experienced, from your family and growing up in a large family? Or do you think, growing up in a large family drove you to prove yourself? Do you think it's both, either?
I don't think it drove me to prove myself. I think it was, I truly believe that you're born with certain personalities, and then your experiences along the way help shape that. So, at a micro example, my wife probably was never got in trouble in her entire life. Me, I remember I would start school every year thinking, I'm going to sit on my hands. I'm not going to raise my hand. I'm not going to, be the class clown or the troublemaker. And 30 minutes in, I was, had something to say. So, everybody, what I've learned about people is everybody has their challenges and they have their strengths and weaknesses. And so while persevering necessarily hasn't been a weakness, it's staying positive, or increasing your emotional intelligence, not overreacting to things. And so that's what I've tried to do, is look at people who do things better than me, but from a different approach, and see how I can incorporate that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Every strength has weakness. And well, our 30 minutes are up. I would love to have you back sometime. We just barely got started on so much more we could encompass and that we could look at. We were talking about everyday leadership. And I think a lot of times there's some great leaders, like you mentioned a moment ago, to look around and to learn from them. And this is the last. Is this the last term of our mayor?
It is. He is term limited out.
So he's had like many of you guys leading during the whole COVID experience.
He has
a lot of wisdom on the other side, I'm sure, of things that you glad you did, and some things maybe you do a little different in the future.
Absolutely. And so there'll be some tough decisions soon on because that will be an open seat, and I think we will see. We'll always have to constantly strive to improve.
Right. Yeah. Well, I thank you for what you guys do. I mean, Cooper City is an incredible place to live here in South Florida. Steph and I have been here going on 23 years, and I've enjoyed all of it.
Well, thank you. Cooper City is an amazing place to live. I'm so passionate about it because I believe that it takes a village, and certainly this village helped raise me. So it's something near and dear to my heart, and I'm so glad to have people like you and Potential Church in our community, because that's really what makes up the community. It's the people.
Yep, that's true. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Troy Gramling podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or one of the other platforms you're listening today. It's an honor to be able to hang out with you. And we're just kind of continuing our journey. We're talking to a bunch of different people. And it's amazing not only to hear their story, their challenges, what they've overcome. And a lot of times, all we have to do is look across the street to find somebody who can truly inspire us to the greatness that we were created for. We'll see you next Thursday right here on the Troy Gramling podcast. God bless.